Good evening, everyone. I'm Riley King, and welcome to the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. Let's begin. First up, Shaheen Hassan prays deal to reopen government, say talks showed common ground on key issues. Senator Jean Shaheen and Maggie Hassan on Monday praised the bipartisan deal that cleared the way for reopening of the federal government after a shutdown that was in its third day, saying bipartisan talks in which they participated showed there is common ground on key issues. And now let's take a look at your U.S. stock market and see how your U.S. stock market closed for this Monday evening. And here's a look at the market right now. Your Dow Joe Industrial Average closed in the green and went up. Your Nasdaq closed in the green and went up. S&P 500 closed in the green and went up. CNBC IQ 100 closed in the green and went up. Gold closed in the green and went up. Oil closed in the green and went up. US 10-year closed in the green and went up. Euro/USD closed flat, and VIX closed in the red and went down. Dow surges 142 points to record, erasing earlier losses as Senate reaches deal to end shutdown. Stocks closed higher on Monday, erasing slight losses from earlier in the session as U.S. lawmakers reached a deal that would resume government operations. Senate ends debate, setting up vote to conclude shutdown, fund government temporarily. Let's take a listen to the video from ABC News.
This is an ABC News special report. Now reporting, George Stephanopoulos.
Good day. We're coming on the air right now because the Senate has just taken a vote that will clear the way to reopening the government the third day into a government shutdown. That's a live look at the Senate floor right now, where the vote has just been taken after a bipartisan compromise where the senators have agreed to allow the government to reopen until February 8th. 3 more weeks in return for a commitment to get a vote on that bill to protect the Dreamers. So there's 800,000 young people who were brought into the country as undocumented immigrants. That demand by Democrats that there be some kind of a vote on DACA tied to the government funding has been what held up the government funding over these last 3 days. But now a bipartisan agreement has been reached to secure a vote sometime in February. I want to go to our senior congressional correspondent, Mary Bruce, for more on this. And Mary, what you saw here is really the old-fashioned Senate. Republicans and Democrats in the middle coming together to force the hands of their leaders.
Yeah, George, it does appear that compromise is alive and well here in Washington after all. There has been a frantic series of negotiations here over the weekend up to this morning. This went really down to the wire here, but as you mentioned, they were able to come together around this deal that in exchange for agreeing to fund the government temporarily for these next 3 weeks, Leader McConnell, the Republican leader of the Senate, made a commitment that he would take up and act on immigration legislation to address these Dreamers. And did, I'm told what really pushed it over the line for Democrats is that he agreed that if they can't reach an agreement by February 8th, he then made a commitment that he would immediately take up some kind of legislation to address DACA and the Dreamers. But George, this all comes down to a commitment by Mitch McConnell. So Democrats here are essentially taking him at his word, which could be a bit of a risk. But Democrats that we have talked to in the last hour as this has been coming together essentially told us they thought this was going to be as good as it was going to get. In fact, one senator using the words of the Rolling Stones to explain you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes you just might find, George, you get what you need.
And one thing they didn't get, Mary Bruce, is any commitment to see the same kind of consideration in the House.
Yeah, that's still the big question here. What comes next in the House? Now, Paul Ryan has said that he would take up a vote on this temporary funding deal, but will they make the same commitment to act on Dreamers going forward? That remains a big question. And, of course, what will the president do next as well?
Well, I want to go to our senior White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, for more on that. The president taking some heat from Senator Schumer as he announced this agreement, saying the president was largely absent from these negotiations. The Democrats never knew where he stood on the negotiations over the immigration bill, and this was worked out in the Senate in these final hours. But the White House can claim credit for not backing down to that Democratic demand that any consideration of DACA, that any passage of DACA be tied to government funding.
Yeah, and that was certainly our reporting here, George, that the White House was going to stand firm on that and not budge. They really felt like the Democrats were going to cave and come under fire. And really, that's what many of the Democrats are facing right now. A lot of the initial reaction coming in is that people are saying Democrats caved and they surrender. The president will probably take a victory lap. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear from him soon here at the White House. But I've got to tell you, much of the narrative coming out of these negotiations over the last 3 and 4 days is exactly what Chuck Schumer just said right there on the Senate floor, that the president, he called him the great deal maker, great deal making president, but he hadn't actually spoken to him since last Friday. And we do know from sources here at the White House that while the president spent many of the last few days of this weekend in the Oval Office on the phone, he didn't actually call any Democrats. So, this will certainly be the narrative going forward. Did he sit on the sidelines too much? Can he really take the credit for the results that we are seeing today? We will see. And can they actually get to an agreement on the overall immigration issues between now and February 8th, where we'll be right back in the same situation 3 weeks from now? You can get the latest news anytime by downloading the ABC News app. Also, there will be a special edition of World News Tonight with David Muir in Washington tonight. I'll see you tomorrow on GMA.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. And that does it for the Riley King Newscast right here on the Riley King Network. I hope you all have a great rest of your Monday evening, and I'll be back with another newscast tomorrow. And I'll have a news report later on this evening. Good night, everyone. Bye.